us? Okay,
It's just us and Herb Garn is here.
hi Herb.
Hello, Herb.
Hey, hello.
Yeah.
I'm surprised I'm the only one.
Yeah, it's early yet. See,
We're worn out, I guess.
Yeah, okay, so we take the roll, Rich.
Yeah, I'll take it, Warren.
Larry? Okay,
We got Potter, Urban, Pullman, Ramsey, Bachhuber, and Giebert.
okay,
It's all 6.
so we need a motion for approval of the minutes from December 15th.
I read them over and I'll move to approve.
Okay, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Okay, the first item of business then is the monitoring agreement with accounting.
That's correct. This is what we've been doing for years. The difference this time is CARPC asked to put us on a 5-year schedule last year. We said no. I wasn't here, but I tried to recover why we said no, and I could not determine that. So they asked again this year to put us on a 4-year contract. And that's what I'm recommending. I passed that through Finance Director Bill Burns, and he's okay with it.
Ramsey will recommend approval in the amount of $58,636.
I have one question on it before we, okay, is there a second?
I
Yes,
second.
sir.
Okay, I have one question on it. How do places like USGS know the cost 4 years out? I see they got some kind of not to exceed in there, so they put in an inflation factor.
Well, they developed a schedule of costs. Let me, between all the municipalities. And so they are increasing it a little bit each year.
It's like 1.9% increase each year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're just sort of guessing with inflation taken off the way it is right now, what's really going to take place. So I don't know how firm is that with their commitment, or anybody's for that matter. Is it somewhere in there based on available funding or anything?
I think it's a firm commitment, Warren.
Do we know what the other entities, whether they've agreed to it? Did they last year?
According to Mike Rupiper at CARPC, yeah, everybody had signed up for the 5-year contract last year, except for Middleton.
Okay.
Okay.
This will keep our increase to what they figured in. I mean, it's a contract, so they won't be raising the price on us.
Yeah, correct.
And do
So
we,
it's kind of like price protection for the next 4 years.
Right.
all right,
Yeah.
do,
You know, USGS is based, their money available is based on co-op funding, and the amount of co-op funds they get every year fluctuates, so. But they signed it, so whatever. Okay,
do
we
we,
have
are we,
we have a motion and a second.
yeah, I have a question also, Lauren. Do we pay this annually then, or is it 30, whatever the number is, the 4 years up front? How's this work?
We are paying it annually. In fact, I think I already have the invoice for this coming year. Yeah, one shot at the beginning of the year.
It would have to be annually with USGS because they can't carry money over.
Yeah.
If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
Whoops. Okay, next item is update to stormwater management ordinance. I hope everybody had the chance to look through some of these things. I think the main points are both Madison and Dane County recently updated theirs. They definitely collaborated in some respects. Like both of them included a new definition for green infrastructure. I think their goals were slightly different. Madison got hammered by the 2018 floods, similar to Middleton. And, they're hemmed in by existing infrastructure and things like that. So my take on Madison's revision is that, it's heavily into increasing infiltration, conveyance capacity, especially for redevelopments. And that makes sense because, where Madison was hardest hit is all existing infrastructure, and they're trying to rectify some of those problems bit by bit.
To start with, Eric, it's a good job putting this together in
Yeah.
kind of a format
Yes,
so we can
yes.
follow through it and make sense. So I appreciate that. I think you did a good job.
Well, thank you. I didn't get as far as I wanted to, honestly. Just last week, I know Jim was there and maybe Ken Potter was there at the NASICA conference.
No. I wasn't there.
Okay, Greg Freeze, and for those of you who don't know, he's the principal engineer at City of Madison who handles stormwater, and he made a presentation there.
Oops.
Are you okay?
So
Sorry, something fell.
that wasn't lightning strike, at least, or an earthquake.
He made a presentation there and gave an overview of, Madison's approach to the ordinance rewrite. I think we can save ourselves a lot of investigation, by trying to mirror what these other two entities are doing. And, as we've discussed before, we are bound to stay at least as strict as the county's ordinance is. It gets complicated, of course, because the ordinances aren't all structured the same ways. I'll eventually have to come to you with revisions to our erosion control ordinance, which is a different chapter. A lot of these things are included in our land development ordinance. So we'll have to make some revisions to that also, and whether that ends up as we're putting some more requirements in the stormwater ordinance and just referring to them in the land development ordinance, I'm not sure yet, but either way, that'll have to get revised also.
So right now, Eric, we're just looking for more comments, and then you're going to keep on working back on it and come back later on. So this is not the final look at it at all.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
eventually I'll bring you a line by line.
Yeah, a highlighter or something like that with changes.
I'll send you a clean copy and then probably a track changes copy.
Yeah, that'd be good. And maybe right now we just go through it, major one by one, and see if people got comments like the Dane County ordinance revisions, then go to City of Madison. So just take a see and see if people got any comments. And I think the 200-year flood that Madison and Dane County is trying to do, the way they're doing it is really trying to simulate the 100-year flood by using the 200-year flood and using the current Atlas 14 rainfall event.
Yeah.
And I think we ought to be more aggressive and really go to the 200-year flood and adjust rainfall events to be like Dr. Wright did. During last week, Stormwater published my article again, and I got a contact in their newsletter. And because of that, I got a contact from a planner or engineer out in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, and he wanted some information. So I sent him our ordinance, and Eric sent him some stuff. And I wrote back that we're thinking of increasing ours to the 200-year flood. And he said they're going to increase theirs to the 500-year flood. So just to give you an idea of what other people are doing. So I think that we're not looking at current conditions. We're trying to guess what the 100-year flood might be 10, 20, 30 years out, because what we do today is going to have to stand for years. So I think we ought to be more aggressive if we can.
Well, I'll chime in. I think I know I was in communication with Greg throughout this process when he was developing this, and he and the city of Madison spent a lot of time talking to developers and impacted stakeholders before they came out with the recommendations, and it was a slog to get this adopted. So it was a difficult challenge. I don't know if we're going to face that here in Middleton or not, as much of a pushback from the business community. We may. I don't know. But I would suggest there's some benefit to having standards that are close to or identical to the county and city, so that people aren't jumping around with different levels of management from different cities. I'm thinking about the development community. And I know Greg's decision to go with this Atlas 14 200-year event was a pragmatic one. He wanted to use Dr. Wright's numbers, and that's what he's trying to mimic. But he also knew that he might get pushback about the validity, what's the science behind it. Obviously, I'm not going to challenge Dr. Wright. He's got this stuff figured out. But to avoid some of those challenges, that was Greg's logic for going with the Atlas 14 numbers, to mimic as best he can the work done by Dr. Wright.
Yeah, well, when we did the modeling study, they used the Dr. Wright's adjusted rainfall events and reproduced the 100-year flood at the gauging station. So there is some validity to, at least in that one case for the model, that Dr. Wright's adjusted 100-year flood does reproduce the 100-year flood that's recorded at a gauging station. So now I don't know.
I'm showing you guys those two options now, or the two different tables of depths,
Mm-hmm.
just for comparison. The right depth is actually lower for the smaller storms than the Atlas 14 numbers are.
That's interesting.
But then it catches up by the 25-year storm.
So for the 10-year storm, it'd be about the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's only the bigger storms that kick it up. So with the current approach, we'd be going from a 6.7-inch rainfall to a 7.65 rainfall management, if that's what we decide to go with, as opposed to a 9-inch rainfall, which would be the 500.
There's
The nine would be the 200.
9 would be the, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I read that wrong. You're saying that. Thanks, Warren.
I'm sure it wouldn't be as dramatic, but that 6.6 inches is an average over Dane County. And, as you move to the west side of the county, the number goes up slightly. We could use an average for Middleton proper, and then that 6.66 probably turns into 7. I don't know what the 200 would be.
I'm not sure where you're seeing a 6.66. Are you talking about a 6.7?
Yeah,
Rounded up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is 6.66 in the Madison ordinance.
Okay. Yeah, well, we're not gonna quibble over 400s, but
No.
You know, I, as much as I respect Dan Wright's work, which is excellent work, I think to the outsider, it probably gives some of them a little heartburn that we're using a number that, you know, is coming out of the university as opposed to something more standard, because we do everything else, you know, following the weather service and so on and so forth. So to me, going to Atlas 14 with the 200-year event, you know, even though it's the whole thing's a game, right? Because we're going to the 200. But, you know, I don't, yeah, so I kind of lean a little bit towards going to Atlas 14 on this.
and using the 200 like Madison's doing.
Yeah. And that way we're consistent with Madison. I think there's a benefit
Yeah,
there.
I agree with that. I just think we're under designing things for the future because we know climate change is occurring and it's going to keep on occurring. So on the other hand is the weather service may update Atlas 14 too, right?
That's right. I would think that they would be here. And maybe they'll even be more sophisticated about it and come up with some future prediction. You know
So
what I mean?
if we had a 200 built in and they updated that, we'd be better off.
Yeah.
Hey.
Right.
But I'm assuming, and again, I'm all in favor of modifying this down the road if evidence says so, and I don't doubt that. But in our ordinance, Eric, I think we would identify what these rainfalls are in terms of inches, right? I mean, Madison describes them as, 24-hour X number of inches with a certain distribution, which I think is a good idea to use in our ordinance.
I don't think it's specifically stated currently, but we can certainly insert that in there, sure.
It does in the Madison ordinance. Yeah, it says MSE for NRCS rainfall distribution.
Yeah, I meant ours currently.
Oh, no, ours does not, correct. Yeah.
Madison does spell it out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While we're looking at this, storm sewers are designed for the 10-year event. And if we use the current Atlas, we're really underdesigning our storm sewers. And I think we look at a higher frequency for our storm sewers for conveyance. Because if storm sewers don't hold the 10-year event, we're going to have flooding problems with small events.
I don't think Madison increased theirs above
They didn't.
10-year.
They didn't. I checked them. They didn't do it.
But what they did do was make sure that the flood flows in the street were non-damaging, staying within the right of way. And then I think for the 500, they said, not damaging a structure.
Boy, I've never seen any routing by anybody in our developments taking the 10-year flood down the streets.
It is done. I've done it myself in the consulting world. It is, I don't know the level of calcs that have been done in Middleton prior. I think this is pretty common practice now in Iowa. There's also one of the most frequent problems that I see is just a lack of inlet capacity. And I don't think that's ever really analyzed in too much detail either, but
It should be.
there are requirements in our land development ordinance, which perhaps haven't been followed entirely. I'm not sure.
So Eric, if we go with this routing of the 100 and the 500, for within the right of way and no property damage within the development, does that mean submittals would have to include some kind of a 2D modeling display of water surface elevations under those two conditions? Is that what your understanding would be?
I don't think it has to be 2D, no.
What would be the option, or how would you show that?
Well, if it's not 2D, all you're talking about is flood peaks.
No, it's just a depth. Like a HECRAS model is still just a 1D model.
Yeah, so for 100 CFS, you get 6 inches. Okay, yeah.
But you can run your street cross section and figure out the capacity at each elevation and then actually calculate that for the critical points. And, you know, you're making sure with your inlet calcs that the flow spread is not too far out over the center line or to the center line, so that you can always get emergency vehicle access down the center line of the street. You know, this,
You could run the heck, you're saying a heck model, right? For that?
no, I was just saying it's just a heck model is just a 1D model.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm trying to visualize how you would do that in a subdivision setting, like let's just take Misty Valley or the, you know, with multiple streets, intersections, elevations. You'd put together links and nodes for every street then? Is that what you're saying?
I think basically, yeah. I've got a spreadsheet, you know, that will calculate the flow spread. I think even like Nina has a little slide rule tool that you can use to, you know, given a flow rate, a longitudinal slope, and a casting type, you can figure out how much is going to make it into casting. Then you go back and say, well, I've got 2 CFS that's bypassing this inlet, and what's the flow spread as it moves down the street, keeps on getting a little wider, and then it will curl back in. I mean, it's a cost to a developer's engineer to
Right.
do that detail.
Wouldn't it be a good idea just to require 2D modeling?
I think at this point, 2D modeling might take some engineers off the table.
Yeah. I think you would too, but I'm also thinking that's really the way, seems to me, the way it's going to go, you know, certainly moving in that direction. And then I'm trying to think, Eric, for the 500, no property, no building damage. You'd have to show elevations for every lot then, and have that figured out even during the plat development phase, right?
This is something that I will strongly recommend, is that lots adjacent to drainage ways have minimum low openings specified on the plats.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just see it. I've seen it a lot. It's not that difficult if you've got a culvert crossing at Misty Valley Road.
Yeah.
To set a minimum floor elevation for the properties directly upstream and adjacent.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree.
And maybe add in some freeboard because we know elevations are going to increase.
And I'm not going to be able to track that down now, but that may actually already be in our subdivision regulation. There are quite a few caveats in that.
So maybe we ought to go down to the next one, next page. We already talked about the peak rate control, I guess. But what is that thing for redevelopment? You don't like doing that like Madison does? If we're being consistent with Madison, why don't we do what they're doing?
Well, what I'm saying is that I think our 45% infiltration requirement for redevelopment, which was unique in the area, kind of does this same thing.
I guess I have a hard time following that.
Our ordinance right now just says half of the new development infiltration requirement, which
is
translates to 45%.
interpreted as 45% infiltration.
Yeah.
And most other municipalities in the area have not had an infiltration requirement for redevelopment sites.
Right.
The infiltration requirements based on infiltrating, what, 45% of the average annual rainfall? And I
Correct.
don't see how that relates to 15% reduction in peak flows. Peak flows are different than annual. I mean, the two aren't related.
Agreed. Let me search for something here.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that 15% of peak, if they said 15% of the 10-year volume, I would understand that. I don't understand peak rate.
That's peak discharge. So the peak discharge is 100 CFS. You got to get it down to 85, I guess.
Again, that's a flow control, Warren, not a infiltration
I know,
criteria.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Ron,
yeah.
I'm wondering if I typed that wrong, Jim.
Okay, I was going to try to find Greg's slides again, but let's see what he's got here. Go to I think the next slide, maybe.
This is redevelopment.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No. I think
Volume reduced by 5% during the 10-year design. Shoot.
yeah, see, they say no infiltration.
But they got a different one for runoff volume. So they address peak rate and runoff volume as separate ones, which I think is what we should do
Yeah.
too.
My apologies, I typed this in wrong. It's reduced the volume by 5% for a 10-year storm, is what Madison's doing,
The volume or the peak?
the volume.
There's also a peak flow requirement, Warren, but there are two different things applying to the 10-year storm. I'm reading the Madison ordinance right now. Trying to get to that.
But Eric is recommending we don't follow what Madison's doing. Because our infiltration requirement accomplishes the same thing.
It's headed in the same direction anyways.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you for any one development which would be more restrictive, the Madison approach or 50% of our new development requirement.
If we really can't tell which would be more restrictive, does it make sense to go with the way Madison is doing it so we have some regional consistency?
That makes sense to me.
Might I suggest, Eric, in all your spare time, you could run a couple of examples for us on a, generic type development?
That's
I could
pretty
try
hard
it.
to do, isn't it? That's pretty hard to do.
I don't think so.
I can give it a shot. And if I can't come to any conclusions, we could have both of those requirements. We could stick with what we have and then add this on top of it.
That makes sense to me. I like that.
But yeah, the combinations are endless, or the possibilities.
Mhm.
So, okay, where are we?
I'm going back to where we were.
Okay, good.
It's always a good idea.
I wish I could go back to where I was. I have to pick out what age I would go back to it, but that wouldn't be hard. I could figure out a number of good ones. Okay, so what we're looking at, water quality.
Yeah, so both Madison and Dane County added a requirement for green infrastructure. The definition of green infrastructure is a little wishy-washy to me. And again, I kind of think that our 45% infiltration accomplishes the same or close to the same thing. But, I think we should, we can include that definition.
Okay,
I think the intent is that they're just trying to add infiltration.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that conference last week, Greg Freeze, I think, and Jim, maybe you can add into this. He basically stated that their intent was to force redevelopments to include green roofs.
Especially in downtown.
Really no other place to store this stormwater.
Right.
And that's, as I try to define that in that other document, infiltration doesn't have to mean that it's going into the soil and percolating down. It just means that it's not leaving the site. So if a development gathers water in a cistern and then later reuses it for irrigating their landscaping, that counts as infiltration also.
What's going to happen when we get a development where we end up having groundwater flooding issues, which we already have in Dane County, by the way? Infiltration is going to make it worse. I used to be a major fan of infiltration. I'm more of a fan of green, of plants, ET. So I think we ought to be pushing people to green up more. It might cause problems in east of us when that water gets in the sky, but I think we got to be a little careful with infiltration. I don't think we can use it the way we were using it 10 years ago. I think we have to use a lot more green, ET. And so we ought to be encouraging greening up spaces.
how can we put that into our ordinance?
Well, but Ken, that is, except for the permeable pavement, everything else is using vegetation right now. It's infiltrating some or a lot, depends on the soils, but they all have vegetation associated with them, right?
Yeah, but I think we've got to ensure that happens. They don't have to be. A lot of them don't keep the vegetation up and so on and so forth.
Well, that's, yeah.
And if the key is to rejuvenate, is to get the soil and the subsoil permeable, right? That's well, for infiltration. Anyway, I just am worried because I've been talking to people around the country about groundwater flooding, and they're having issues with it, and it's a real bear to deal with. You really got to green up. So whatever we can do to promote deep-rooted vegetation with lots of leaf area index. I think leaf area index is going to become in 10 years, we're going to be using that as a requirement. You're going to have a certain amount of leaf area index. Almost certain.
Could we put something on their infiltration as in lieu of infiltration, come up with this type of green structure instead? Let the developer come up with some other kind of alternatives if he wants to reduce his infiltration requirement.
We can at least require that infiltration, that you just don't have sand beds and stuff like that. You actually have vegetation, and then you got to maintain that vegetation. That's another problem. If you go around, and I know the city's done that before, Madison, and look at infiltration practices, what happens to green a lot of times, it disappears, so it's got to be maintained. That's a key.
And that's going to be an ongoing challenge because, the more stuff we have, which again, I'm supportive of, It just means city staff have more places to go look to see that compliance is being met. And I know that, staffing, municipal staff levels are never a popular thing to increase around budget time. Guessing Mr. Ramsey might have a comment on that, but trying to put together budgets for the adequate staff to inspect these places is a
Well,
challenge.
We haven't done a good job of that over the last 50 years. I mean,
No.
we got over 160 sites, but I don't know how many really have been tested to see if they're working. We know a lot of them don't work.
No.
Warren, Herb Garn has his hand up if you want to recognize him.
Sure, go ahead, Herb.
Hi. Yeah, I was thinking along those lines, is what Ken was saying too. And I like, some of the green infrastructure approaches that's in the county changes. So I was wondering, that's maybe an area in order to, keep as much runoff on site as possible with this green infrastructure. Is that a stormwater ordinance thing, or is it a zoning ordinance thing? And, I'm not clear on that, where the zoning ordinance might come in to accomplish, more green spaces like Ken was saying. And how that's coordinated with the stormwater ordinance.
If you don't mind me jumping in here, Eric, I mean, Madison just is completing a pretty significant study trying to match up better their zoning code with their stormwater code and getting definitions to match and requirements and trying to lower some barriers in zoning that may have interfered with installation of green infrastructure in certain cases, based on lot availability and side all the different things that zoning does sometimes can impair some GI type of implementations.
We are currently in the middle of a zoning rewrite project in the city. And I don't know if this has been something that has been brought up to America. Have you had any conversations with I think it's Vanderwall that's doing that project? Have you had any conversations with them?
Jim had made comments earlier, and those comments on this very same topic, and those comments did get shared with Vanderwall by Mark Opitz a month and a half or 2 months ago. So yes, I'm anticipating that that's going to get incorporated into this draft. And last I heard, Water Resources is going to have a chance to weigh in on the rewrite. They told me February, but it's not a surprise, I guess, that it hasn't come yet.
I get the feeling it's more, I'm going to be critical here, reactive rather than cooperative process. And it sure seems like it makes sense for somebody to be involved with that process as it moves along, not reacting to, whatever 100-page document comes out of it says, here's the new code. What do you think? But maybe that horse is left to barn, as they say. I don't know if that's even a possibility.
I've been trying to stay on top of it, Jim.
I appreciate that, Eric. I'd like to think they were reaching out, not just you banging their door down, but they're also inviting you in to these sessions to be a part of them.
Yeah. Understood.
Okay.
It's a good
I said my piece.
Very
We're
good.
talking about Bell Farm. Didn't we talk about doing this, working with those people who attack more green infrastructure things?
Yes, that has been, Ken brought that up, that has been an ongoing, it started to become part of the conversation.
And didn't EPA have some workshops or things out in, I can't remember the state, Connecticut, where they were actually talking about these sort of things. And I thought our consultant was going to look into those.
There's a lot of examples around to look at. Ken, you at one point thought you might have some conversations on the Bell Farms example to try and, influence some of the thought process on that. Does that ever occur or not?
The developer there had shown a lot of interest, but I haven't seen the product yet. I haven't been in contact for a couple months now. So,
Okay.
but there, seemed to be good faith there in doing that stuff.
There has been, I got out of the developer's consultant just some really rough modeling, and it appears they're trying to do distributed practices within these lots, and then also downstream practices. So I think they are working in good faith, and what we asked for was this 100% infiltration and 200-year rate control. But it's difficult. And I think when you talk about swales as opposed to storm sewers, that there's always going to be this space consideration. And, the right of ways that they have proposed are narrow. There's been a lot of discussion about, Bellefontaine may no longer end up as the cross section that was proposed when it went through Misty Valley as a 4-lane road with a boulevard. It's going to be much more narrow, most likely. They've got some lots that are alley loaded, more kind of new urbanism type stuff. And honestly, it doesn't leave a whole lot of space for green infrastructure in, like I think you guys are talking about here, which are basically swales.
Yeah. Now, well, maybe we got to move on to the next one then.
Well, so this was kind of the funny thing that I had brought up last month, that maybe we could use the TMDL requirements as a way to not only increase water quality performance, but also gain some infiltration. So I ran a little bit of SLAM modeling, and what I realized was, if we're talking about a very impervious site, especially like a redevelopment site, the infiltration requirement does the trick on its own. And I believe that's because, there's a component of dissolved and a component of particulate phosphorus.
Mm-hmm.
It's the dissolved we cannot capture unless we're going to use some kind of chemical treatment or infiltrate. And from landscaped areas and farm fields and things like that, the dissolved component is much higher than it is off of pavement.
Mm-hmm.
So our traditional practices work pretty well on heavily impervious sites, but it would make a difference on something like Bell Farms or, the acre proposal just to the east of Misty Valley, a greenfield residential style development. So I'm still ready to support that idea. I think we're paying for this phosphorus by the pound through adaptive management, and it's really pretty cheap. We only pay about $50 a pound, but we're not going to make any progress towards it. And in fact, we'll be moving farther from the goal if we allow new developments to not meet that same phosphorus goal.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
that,
what are you recommending then, Eric?
I'm recommending that within a watershed that's within the TMDL, that a new development has to meet that, the same goal that the city has for our MS4.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
You know,
and is that number 78% for the Pheasant branch and 78% for Lake Mendota? That's a TP.
61 for Lake Mendota.
Okay.
You know, the rule of thumb was 80% TSS equals 54% TP.
Right. So you're losing ground if you just stick with that.
Yeah,
These reductions, percent reductions are all based on model studies. If you implement a procedure, you get so much reduction, right? It's not actual measurements.
it's all modeling. As I
Yeah.
recall, the Rock River TMDL was set up using medium density residential standard land use, you know, as the default. And that's where you might have heard 1 pound per acre of phosphorus. I believe that's where that came from, or it was 1.04 maybe. You know, there are a couple of just general rules of thumb that came out of that.
Yeah,
It's a percent reduction from that land as if it was not managed at all. So it's a reduction from no management condition.
Right.
Mm.
But that's still very aggressive. I mean, those are hard numbers to hit. That 78 and 61%. And infiltration, just what Eric said, is the only tool in the toolbox to get to those numbers that I know of. Unless you're going to add chemicals.
no, the whole,
Well, this last paragraph I wrote, I took basically a development similar to Bell Farms, and we ended up doubling the size of a standard biofilter to get to 78.1% TP as opposed to 90% infiltration. But both of those biofilters are relatively small because, you know, the land use is just not very impervious. That was still only 1% of the site for the floor of that basin, 1.1%.
okay,
So if we follow this, Eric, we would, in the ordinance, it would say you must achieve those percent of TP reduction, from a no controls condition, depending on which drainage area you're in. Here's your numbers to hit.
Yeah.
It's going to get some, challenges, I think, when somebody on one side of the divide has a development that, is going to be easier to do than on the other side of the divide from a stormwater point. And that's just the reality of it. I'm willing to fight that battle, but I just want to be aware of it.
Is anybody looking at the phosphorus content of the groundwater that's coming into Lake Mendota that's been infiltrated to get rid of phosphorus? I'm just wondering, is that, groundwater is moving to the lake, right? Everything, all the groundwater north of Mendota ends up, it's relatively close, ends up in the lake.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering whether we're fooling ourselves.
I don't think anybody's monitoring the water quality. And I think nitrates are probably a bigger problem in the groundwater, or just as big a problem.
That's true, but I'm just saying, yeah, that's right. We don't measure the phosphorus.
No,
You'll have to talk to DNR about that one, Ken. I don't think groundwater was one of the pieces of the pie when they developed the TMDL. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so, these are the regs that we're living under, and whether we think now they were well done or not so well done, that's another
Yeah, I know. I'm just.
issue.
Yeah, we'll probably all be long gone when that phosphorus gets to the lake, but
The next year or the year after. Well, these TMDLs are based on current conditions. We know with climate change, runoff is increasing, so runoff increase, so
Yeah.
is sediment and so is phosphorus load. So, we're not catching up to what's happening anyway. So
yeah, that's true.
it's I don't know.
I don't
Well-
know. I'll take controlling flooding over algae control, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, the western part of the country is looking at major droughts for years to come because of climate change. And I guess I'd rather have our problem than drought problems too.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's next then? The closed basins? I think we're all probably in agreement. We've increased the 100% infiltration on closed basins. Is that what Madison's doing?
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah, Madison's, yeah.
You know what? It's very complicated what Madison has done. They're trying to account for, I don't even know if I can find it.
Well, maybe we're better off just keeping ours at 100% and not go what Madison's doing on that one.
Well, they're asking for, one for like structure protection. They want you to run a double 100-year storm just to make sure that you're not flooding a structure. They've changed their closed depression. I think this is for rate control, volume control, from a 25 to 100. And then there's all kinds of new requirements on older plats and things that were grandfathered before. And then they're not allowing the grandfathering anymore, or only to a certain extent.
I'm just thinking, I can't make any commitments for anybody else, but I'm wondering if, we have lots of questions on this, and we see some merit in following as much as we can some of the Madison example. Would it be worth seeing if Greg might be willing to get on a call with us next month and just have a dialogue with him to ask him these questions about some of the nuts and bolts of implementing, and what's he found so far when he gets trying to comply with this aspect or that aspect of their ordinance. I don't know if that would be of interest or not, or helpful. I think it'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Or you think of,
I
well,
agree.
shouldn't we get a proposal of what our ordinance is going to say first?
Well, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, because if Greg says, well, yeah, I wished I'd done this differently on some aspect,
Yeah.
then we're thinking, well, maybe we should, listen to that and
Yeah.
learn from that experience.
Well,
Okay.
Jim, do you want to approach him?
I'll volunteer myself to, he's like, you can guess, Eric, you're a busy guy. He's going to be a busy guy, but I'll ask and see if he'd be willing to jump on next month. If you want to make time on the agenda for that.
Is he the acting city engineer now?
He is, yeah, I think that's what he's called now, the acting city engineer. And
So I think he's probably going to be a little bit busier.
well, I'll ask. I'll be glad to ask.
Well, maybe Jan Schmidt could do it too.
Who else? Janet? I'll leave that option open, Warren.
Yeah, or Caroline.
I think we pestered Caroline in December, and she said she wasn't intimately involved in the ordinance
Oh.
review.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe just because Jim put her on the spot.
I'm good at that.
Yeah.
Just an aside here, I saw some email, I thought, Jim, where Caroline or someone was gonna make a presentation on the South Fork in March.
I'm
Is that-
doing that. You may just, at the Conservancy Day presentation on the watershed itself, the Pheasant Branch watershed, just very watershed 101 type of presentation in March. And it's through the city's sustainability program and the Friends of Pheasant Branch Conservancy Day program. It's kind of a joint thing.
So it's not the city of Madison.
No, no.
I thought.
There was I'm sorry, Warren, you may have been thinking about, there was a City of Madison public information meeting on Pheasant Branch by Caroline. That was last week.
I
Giving an
sat in
update.
on that.
Yeah, Eric was on it. That's right.
I saw the email and all of a sudden it disappeared and I couldn't find it again. I don't understand that. So I missed
It's on the, if you want to see a link to it, I can certainly send that to you if you're actually interested.
Sure. Yeah. South Fork's a big problem for us.
I think the bottom line with the South Fork is that they're proposing a bunch of pond expansions and improvements, which will keep the discharges the same as they are now. And those improvements coupled with their ordinance revisions, so accommodating all future development, the flows should not increase. I think that's what they felt, they could do.
So there's no mention of retrofitting existing business parking lots.
No, I mean, they're retrofitting a bunch of their own ponds, expanding.
Yeah.
But also increasing conveyance, to reduce minor flooding in other spots.
Or if you drive around the Sauk Trail Business Park and look at some of those large parking lots with no infiltration practices or no detention practices, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Especially when they're all sitting there empty now.
Yeah. Yeah, like the Marriott one.
Yeah.
It's a huge parking lot. There's no detention at all there.
And they're paying a fee for all that too, to the utility. Well, the Marriott's on the Middleton side, right?
Yeah.
Warren, you brought up that Marriott parking lot many months
Right.
ago. Were
Right.
you talking about, there was an alternate lot across John
No.
Q. Hammond's?
No, there is one across, yeah. But I'm talking about the main one,
All right.
because I noticed in the far, that would be northwest corner, where it's the lowest. It seems
Yep.
to me like, part of that parking lot could be made into a detention reservoir. And if we were willing to pay the cost of doing it, if they let us, that might help. But I think the question is, does that runoff go into the pond or does it go into the South Fork directly? If it goes into the pond, I'm not sure what we're gaining.
I'm guessing it goes to Esser Pond, right?
Yeah, it might.
Probably.
I think it goes to Esser, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So then I'm not sure. It would look better than it is right now, but I'm not sure what we're gaining. Yeah, I guess it would still help. I don't know. I guess we could stop Esser from overtopping.
Right. Whatever you pond there, just is that much less water in Esser right away.
Yeah. So it still might be worthwhile.
All
And-
incremental.
We're getting a little off the agenda.
Yeah. Okay, so where are we then, Eric?
One thing that did not make,
We're closed basins, right?
we were talking about closed basins, yes.
Yeah. So either we'll go with the way Madison does it or keep ours now at 100% infiltration. Is that the question?
I don't think, I think the 100% is contained in our land development ordinance perhaps. And in our stormwater ordinance, we have a 10-year volume control, or maybe I have that backwards.
Our city ordinance says 100%. I'm jumping around here. So many different files I got open here.
Yeah.
I thought that Bell Farms had agreed to what we were gonna propose.
Bell Farms agreed to 100% infiltration. Our land development ordinance says the volume of runoff from a 10-year storm shall not be greater.
That's different than our stormwater ordinance.
I believe that's correct, Jim. You know, but both Madison and the county have talked about closed basins. They've set a floor for the size of a closed basin that you would consider as an issue. You know, and I don't think these things are necessarily structured towards something like Graber Pond, but towards something like a site that has laid vacant or, you know, in poor condition for years and is not draining, a smaller site. And then they're saying, well, you got to, you know, account for this volume of stormwater that you've been.
That's right.
Site.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think
Go ahead.
I'll have to flesh that out for you guys a little bit better and come up with actual language, and then you'll be able to make a decision.
Do we have to define what a closed basin is?
Yes,
In Graber Pond, we've decided it's a closed basin.
well, historically, it has been considered a closed basin.
It has been.
So in our Middleton ordinance, a closed basin means any watershed that does not discharge stormwater during a 2-year, 24-hour duration rainfall in its
Okay.
pre-developed condition.
Okay,
That's all it says.
so Graber Pond then would be a closed basin.
Yeah.
The 100-year flood, it probably isn't.
Yeah.
Okay,
And Eric, I think that's the rainfall used by Madison and Dane County, right? Also, but they do some tweaking with the size and whatnot.
I think so, Jim, but
I
don't
think
hold me
so.
to that.
Mushroom. We can figure that out.
One thing, Warren, that did not make it into the memo that I think I would like for you guys to consider tonight, and this is something that Greg Freeze brought up last week. Our trigger for redevelopment stormwater management is 4,000 square feet. And apparently, you know, Greg had ongoing discussions with developers and contractors, and the city of Madison's trigger is now 10,000 square feet. And that is done, you know, simply because they felt it was too onerous to add all of these redevelopment conditions onto a small site redevelopment.
Hmm.
The county's trigger is now 20,000 square feet.
No,
have we had,
so-
have we had a problem with ours? I can't remember any big problem with our ordinance at 4,000 square feet. Maybe we haven't had that much redevelopment.
I haven't had an issue with it since I've been here.
I looked at that Napa site along University Avenue. What was that? Did that fall under that? Because I don't remember even seeing that in our committee.
Is that the site that used to be a Sonic, Warren?
right.
No, it used to be Rusty's Bar.
And
Yeah.
before that,
Well,
Yes, it was.
but that became Sonic, right? Is that the same place?
That's the
Yeah,
same
so-
place. Yeah.
Rusty's, then Sonic, then Napa. Yeah.
If memory serves me, Sonic had installed some infiltration facilities that were just rehabbed for the Napa site.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Can we leave it to just the way it is at 4,000 unless we have some pushback on it?
I would vote for that. Keep it at 4.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, what's next, Eric?
Those are all the big picture items I had asked you to look at. So
Yeah, I got one question. Look, you went through that and described infiltration and peaks and things like that. But one thing that wasn't in there is our recharge requirement.
Oh, yeah.
And I always had some questions about the difference between recharge and infiltration and how a consultant differentiates how they address that.
recharge is actually, I guess, what a common person would think of as infiltration. It's water that's actually making it into the ground. And infiltration is recharge plus evapotranspiration or reuse as irrigation, or, you know.
No, recharge can be a lot less than what's going into the infiltration practices, right? Because of the ET. So, I mean, that's a huge difference. So, I mean, we're encouraging ET. I think we should be.
Yeah.
But we do have to. I just don't think we're going to ever have a groundwater problem. You know, I don't think we're ever going to have a water supply problem. You know, I'm not worried about recharge, except for quality.
I'm confused and maybe a little ignorant. Do we have in our Middleton ordinance a requirement for recharge that's different than infiltration?
We do. And it parallels the county's requirements. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we're stuck with that.
Yeah, can you tell me what it is just quickly, or is that going to take too much? I don't want to drag this out any more than we already have.
I don't know. Let me run a
Well,
search.
it was in there. You have to meet the recharge as defined by the Dane County Geological Survey's study that they did.
Was that all? Huh.
26063, Jim, is infiltration and recharge.
26063.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see the infiltration and recharge.
Number 2 is recharge.
I haven't even paid attention to them.
You know, recharge is usually, both of them are expressed in a depth. And I want to say recharge is usually like 7, 8, 9 inches. You know, and infiltration is more like high teens, maybe up into the 20s.
So if they meet infiltration, they've already met recharge.
Usually, yes.
I was going to say, they don't do 2 different calcs for that, do they? Or I don't recall seeing that.
They do. Yeah. It gets
Okay.
calculated. There's a
I missed it.
GIS-based map that they can use to figure out their target, and it gets calculated.
Okay. So is there anything else to discuss?
I just had a question. It's probably more for the city streets people and staff people. Do you feel a need to do any modification of the stormwater conveyance capacity criteria? We're talking about sewers, culverts, and grass waterways and stuff.
Jim, that's on my long-term list of things to investigate, of where there are capacity issues.
Right now, our ordinance doesn't. I don't know it well enough. Does the stormwater ordinance is silent on that, or is it in there somewhere?
I believe the stormwater ordinance is silent on that, yes. But there's a lot of it contained in the
Public Works streets.
in the land development ordinance.
Okay, because when you accept a street from a subdivision, it's got to be designed to certain criteria, including the
Correct.
storm sewer sizings and inlets and all that, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Sometimes that's also included in the stormwater utility ordinance. You know, I don't know if you noticed, but Madison's ordinance is also their stormwater utility ordinance.
Yep.
Essentially.
yep. I would not advocate mimicking that component. Yeah, I like keeping them separate.
But that the 10-year in the pipe is still pretty standard.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
If you want to recommend beefing that up, that'll be a big cost.
Well, and if we did, then my question becomes, well, what do you do when that pipe leaves the property and it goes into a smaller pipe? You know, you
Right.
can't just shoot it down there. So I just asked a question. Go ahead. I'm done.
Hey, well, this is a tough topic to update the ordinance, and I think we're doing a good job here. And I know it's hard on you, Eric, but I think at future meetings, so outline like you said before, what the revisions are, and we could take another look at it. I remember back, Ken, how many years did it take us to develop the stormwater ordinance? 2 or 3 or 4, 5? It was a major effort, and we hired a lawyer to help us out.
That's usually what it takes. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we're looking for items for the March meeting, and I talked to Eric about a couple of them, and one was updating our FEMA map. And I think that's something we should discuss at a future meeting. We've got a revised floodplain that was done, but we never updated our FEMA map. So I'd like to talk about that in the future. Also, I mentioned to Eric that Yahara Winds has an annual meeting, and they have a presentation by, I think, Kim Meyer, and maybe can invite her or I can't remember the name of her, Kathy Lake, to come and update us on what they're doing. And I think they were here a number of years ago, but I think we've got new members, and it wouldn't hurt to. I know they have an annual report, and I looked at it online. But I think it'd be nice to have them if they would be willing to do a virtual meeting with us.
Warren, after we talked, I did get a hold of Kim Meyer, and she is up for it, but I sent her some dates of future meetings, and I haven't. That's as far as our conversation's gone.
Okay. On the same topic, Kim contacted me after I sent her a copy of that article in Stormwater magazine, and asked if I would be willing to make a presentation to Yahara Winds in March. And I said yes initially, and then I checked my calendar, and my wife's got a doctor's appointment she made 4 months ago, and I just can't cancel it. So I used it exactly the same time. So I had to say no, but she said tried to have me in June or September. So I agreed to do it in June and make the same presentation that I made here. So anyway, that's where we stand with that. Is there anything else? Anybody else have some items they want to put on for the next meeting?
I'll make a request. If Greg is able to meet with us next month, or whatever month he is able to meet with us, I'd like to request that we have a small agenda that night so that we have time for discussion with him. I got a feeling that might turn into a lengthy topic, but I don't want to shortchange him either. So I'm just cognizant that I would hate to have to just squeeze him in, for 5 minutes or whatever.
Sure. Well, like tonight, we spent almost about 2 hours on this, an hour and a half. Yeah, it takes that much time, yeah. That's
Yeah.
fine.
I think it's important.
I see in the future, acre farms is gonna be a development that might come for us.
Yep.
So that would be another big topic. Okay, is there anything else? If not, I declare the meeting over.
Adjourned.
Adjourn.
Over.
Either way.
Over is one way to say it, I guess.
All right.